Okay, Rita and Scott. It's August 1st. And
Yes, a big day.
yes, we're getting closer and closer to bigger days.
And I was asking the guides about something they had told me earlier about healing and being a channel for healing. And they said they really wanted to talk to you, Scott, about releasing anger.
All right. Okay. A little nervous, but I'm all right.
It'll be all right. It'll be relieving. That's what I feel.
Good. Good.
Okay.
Just gonna get myself kind of centered too.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we'll kind of attempt to go a little faster this time to get more information out, like
Okay.
you had mentioned at one point.
Yeah. Fluid.
Fluid. So I don't have to necessarily, search for my questions. They will come out.
Mm-hmm.
And insights will come about too.
Yes, I feel them very anxious and happy to be doing this. So,
Good. So it's been an interesting weekend also for me. So thank you for being here and thank you for coming and just showing. I'm kind of flattered to have this insight about letting go of anger, even though I am a little nervous. Because it is sort of really personal for me. It's, there are parts of anger that I may even be subconsciously holding that I'm not necessarily always aware of. So, but I'll just let you begin and talk. And
yes, we're very happy to do this. We want to reassure you that yes, it is personal truth, and that gets touchy. But and Rita wants to remind you that she also was feeling a lot of anger at earlier years. So it happens. It happens, and it's nothing to be worried about or have any shame about. There are a lot of things in this world that are correct. You are correct in feeling outrage about as a means of personal a love for self as well as a love for others. So we want to make this the day that that correct anger moves through you and out and doesn't get lodged in your soul, spirit, and body. So that to us sounds like a really wonderful thing.
it does to me too. So, where should we begin? Should I speak about some of the things that I feel I've had some anger about before? Just things that come up with me right now. It's just very early, is that between like parent and child and those dynamics that come through.
Very, very, very common, almost, yes, no, totally universal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's probably where that a lot of those things begin. And then those lessons that we learn or lessons that we perceive that we learn during that childhood time is when we start forming our reactions, which include anger, which might give us what we want or fool us into thinking we received what we wanted.
We're reminding Rita of the screaming child across the street every single day. There's a parent's voice and then a prolonged scream, and it sounds very angry, not like hurt. Usually, sometimes hurt, but this child is an example of what you just described.
Wonderful. So I want to, why don't you just sort of speak intuitively? I think I want to take a little time and listen
Hmm.
first.
Most people do have awareness of some anger, and most feel justified in their anger and even in projecting the anger at what they who they see as the cause and anybody else who happens to get in their path. So their focus stays there, but there is all of that underlying years and years of rage that just keeps building and building because it has nowhere to go and no way to be resolved. As you stated, because the parents don't want to look at themselves and what they did to cause that kind of anger in a child who is in a brighter condition than they are for a time. After a time, most people, their soul degrades, and a lot of it is to do with that anger that never has any place to go. And because they learn to suppress it in order to please their parents, their teachers, society, authority, and just the way everyone else acts. To fit in, they suppress it. So you can imagine how much is there over the years. And then you add spirits to that who also enjoy, almost as a sport, nudging that anger, trying to, like a like a an older brother. There's a word that Rita's not quite interpreting. A devious older brother who enjoys teasing you because he has a greater power and he never gets in trouble. So you add that into everything you consciously experience, and you can imagine how much of a buildup that is. So did that bring any feelings or memories for you, Scott?
Well, I think that sometimes we save up injustices. We label something as unjust, and often as part of our anger, because we're not used to or know how to release it, we just collect it like pennies in a penny jar, and those debts just keep getting collected, and it kind of weighs you down. And so the easiest thing is to throw them all out at once.
Debts.
Go ahead.
Debts. They want to say debts is the very much the correct word. Go ahead.
And so you collect all these injustices, almost like a currency to use, and you collect more debt. And they come, and perhaps your anger and those injustices can transform into more anger and then more lashing out, rather than feeling that and moving that somehow. So I think that's the key too. Is like how do we move that? How do we move when we've had that pattern of collecting our debts of injustice? What's the best way to move? Because sometimes people will move that by exploding, or they'll throw those pennies at their predators. In their minds, they're predators. So that's or they'll become addicted to things try and attempt to use those injustice currencies as a justification to an addiction. How do we, what's the best use of like to move that through if you've been a collector of debts?
Yes, this is not the case for everyone, but for you, for Rita too, but we feel it is even bigger for you that you collect it and it's not all yours. So it's not as big as you might feel it is to release. And just like various other things you have felt through, you know already the benefits on the other side of that. And when you start feeling what is yours and not yours, anger will almost immediately switch to happy gratitude. And so the first thing we want to make you aware of is that there is so much in you that is not yours. And so to answer your question, one way to begin releasing, to just open that valve, is to just physically start beating on something, an inanimate object that can or can't be destroyed. If it feels good to destroy something, you can do that. Ripping things. If you had a bat, a baseball bat, and a punching bag, and would just continuously hit the punching bag with the bat, and feel the rage would just automatically come up. Something that Rita has done is a large foam, almost like a swimming noodle, and bashing it on a bed. So it doesn't hurt anything. It's not even very loud, but the action is there. And you can hit it as hard as you want. And speak the injustices as if you are talking to the person who hurt you or projected their anger at you for you to absorb, and say everything that you would like to say. This is not directly, energetically putting anger on them. It's not putting your anger on them. It's giving them back their anger. So that is different than a soul degrading choice of putting your anger on someone else. That's damaging. But to give it back is a healing and loving and correct thing to do.
Interesting. Sometimes it takes a longer time when I play tennis. Usually towards the end of a drill or towards the end of the time where I can actually feel that as a tool, and the tennis ball becomes just an object that I can do that. And it takes a little while for me to get to that point. I almost have to go through, and I think it's probably a metaphor for life, I almost have to go through an exercise of feeling the loss of a point or the loss of a skill hit me many, many times before I release that. And then sometimes I'm successful at the game, and sometimes I'm not. But I feel like that I feel more satisfied, but it takes me time. And if I sometimes could just jump to that sooner, um,
You could even use your tennis racket to beat the bed.
yes, the cheaper one.
Mhm.
Yeah. The one that didn't cost much, the one I don't use much.
Yes.
But yes, and
And we want to say this is a perfect time because Junebug is not there to absorb any of it either.
right. So she's in the spirit world, and she won't be able to absorb that as me sensing that anger. I mean, our dogs will kind
Yeah.
of be mirrors to what our emotions are, um, no matter if they sense it as purposeful or not. So
Yeah.
good.
And we knew that tennis was related to this. Um, and you might be surprised how quickly the anger comes up when you're not in a public space. There's no physical opponent. There's no skill required. Just start beating the bed and let it come up. And if it quickly goes to grief, then perfect, because under the anger is intense grief.
Mm.
Grief for all the ways you weren't loved and couldn't love yourself because you were there to, in their estimation, you were there to absorb their anger or their fear.
Or both.
Mm-hmm.
Most likely both.
Yes.
Fear leading to anger.
Yes.
Hmm.
And that said, you might have to feel a lot of fear before you get to grief. But not so much in releasing other people's anger, because that's their fear to feel.
Yes. Yes. Oh, definitely. Like I can actually see if there is some sort of like, I would say, parental criticism perceived by me is actually just a fear that they are feeling through.
Yes.
So that's. Oh, had I known that a few days ago. No, but that's so, and just then to recognize, to be able to recognize that once you kind of like deplete yourself, maybe being able to recognize, well, that isn't really pointed at me. That's just a reflection of a fear that they may have, or a reflection of their own insecurity of a choice I might be making, and just like explaining it to them, just this is my choice, but then that could trigger their own insecurity of fears and angers and injustices in their own life, and then we
And
perceive them
and
as being reflected back to us.
yes. And it's sad really that it shows a limitation in their life. And that is a place you can feel compassion and sadness if you need to feel sadness about how limiting all of those things you mentioned, fear, anxiety, insecurity, how much that limits a person. And that's also everything you mentioned and we mentioned is also something to give back to the decades of people projecting that out towards you, towards everybody. But
Oh, and just a generation that grew up in trauma, not necessarily a symptom of, say, my parents or your parents, but it's a symptom of generations of folks who grew up traumatized. My folks were World War II children of World War II veterans who had to act and speak in a certain way, and,
mhm,
because they had their own fears and their own um, conditioned responses
yes,
that they went through.
every generation has been traumatized.
Hmm.
And you releasing those traumas, those generational traumas, allows the rest of humanity also. It opens the door further for everyone to do that, which is the ultimate goal.
It is the change me first thing, the changing.
Yes. Regardless of the whole world, it will have a ripple effect outward from you, even just with the personal contacts you have.
Hmm.
But given that you and Rita operate beyond the physical world, it will have effects far beyond what you can see. Spirits are listening to this right now and relating their own experience and their own feelings, and they can see it in them in a different way than you can on Earth. But you will notice physical changes as you release other people's anger.
I almost feel like I can breathe deeply now,
Mm.
much more deeply than a few minutes ago, even just talking about this.
Mm. Yes. Yes, it will be a freedom. It will be a shedding, a heavy weight that you've
Mm-hmm.
carried.
And a little bit of sweat coming through. It's very
Mm.
interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That's really nice to have these fast awarenesses.
Yes.
Breathing deeper, a little bit of toxin. Well, anytime you sweat, you allow certain things to be released from your body through your skin. That's
Yeah.
very nice. It's already so. This is something to remember.
Right.
Feeling right now is something to remember.
Do you have any of that anxious feeling that you had before we started?
No,
Okay.
not right now.
We want to point out that it is this easy.
Oh my goodness. And I actually have a little bit of compassion coming through too. And so I'm feeling a little bit of that and so just understanding and compassion, knowing that this is not my anger to keep.
Mm-hmm. You know what it's been like to carry it all these years. And so you can have compassion for those who receive it back and then have to deal with it themselves.
Yes. The challenge may be, the challenge might be for me is to not quickly go back to, and I don't like believing in any sort of karmic debt or replay, but part of, there is like the child in me that wants to see the little trinkets of justice delivered. And that is the challenge. And I have to have compassion for that child. I think that that child just feels its feelings rather than having that um, it's kind of like reaching for a piece of candy that's a little bit of justice. It's like you're a little bit of chocolate, they're like sweetness of seeing someone else deal with their own anger. And so that is the challenge, I think, of once we go through this. That's just what I'm picking up right now, is that we have to have a little compassion for our inner child, just to not satisfy that immediate want. Just let that child continue to cry a little bit longer while we see others.
Because that is not the child. That is the child acting out the adult feelings of
Right.
rage. Yeah. Yeah. To just to recognize that that desire for revenge is still anger.
Yes.
Yes, revenge, mild, just because you want to see them hurt a little bit, as you have hurt, but and not to inflict greater pain, but just in kind. But wanting to see it is their anger still. And then that's a moment of faith, of building faith that God sees it, however it plays out in through God's laws that are already in place, that they may already be feeling it. And so much more fun to look for evidence of a shift in others. For instance, someone may come to you with greater kindness and openness, if not a direct apology. And how much more satisfying that might be than to watch them feel the pain.
I have to just make sure that I don't fragment myself that way. In order to, so that's the keeping my soul with my body and my person, so that I don't fall into those traps of fragmentation. This is the part of me that will feel compassion, and this is the part of me that will have will hold on to the anger secretly, or this is the part of me that will.
There are no secrets.
I know. This is the tricks that my mind plays. So it is, because God sees all of these things. There are no secrets. So so it's just an exercise my mind is going through to kind of go back to its addiction. So once I'm pulling and breathing wildly and my my cells are releasing and throwing my sweat out, then there is a part of my addictive brain that still wants to reach back. And so if I can just recognize that that's what's happening as an observer. Oh, there are layers.
Yes.
Many layers.
So many layers. Yes.
It's good that I'm feeling all of this right now.
It is. It's wonderful.
Even the tug back and forth from the addictive brain and the addictive emotional parts of our soul that want to cling back after you actually have a little bit of a sign of healthiness.
Right. And this is evidence, regardless of anybody else and how they end up choosing to feel whatever is coming to them right now in your release. You will get to the point where it doesn't matter at all because you feel it so thoroughly. And then if somebody shows you evidence, you'll just be like, oh, nice. I'm glad for you. Because you'll feel their soul healing and brightening just a tiny bit. And it doesn't have anything to do with you healing because you've already taken care of that through your choices and your openness and willingness to feel. You won't need anything from anybody on this subject.
That feels so refreshing.
Yes, it's very freeing.
And very freeing, yes. Not just refreshing, but just very freeing.
Yes. And these are the physical changes that you will feel. Your body just automatically starts processing and rearranging on a cellular level. Rita's feeling some of that too. And then your spirit automatically feels different to others, even though it's unconscious to most everyone.
Well, we've gotten the cellular matrix cleared of amounts of soot and gunk.
Be prepared for detoxifying in the next, however long it takes.
But yes. I have a feeling it won't be very long.
And we want to relate it to the deputy that came to Rita's house to remove the darkness. We want to tie that in with the demons that you deal with and how you will feel addressing them. And we want to stop there with that point to see what that, to find out how you feel about this subject and the demons you deal with, and relating it to the deputy who removed the darkness with the light.
I definitely feel like I have a little bit easier time in the spirit realm with the evil forces. It's
easier than
the waking world with how I retain anger and how I have, let's just say how I have in the past retained anger. Today is a new day. I'm going to put my cells better.
Yes.
But I sort of see them as an observer when I'm in the spirit realm or in my dreams. I'm an observer, and I understand my place and their place, and it's not coming from it's a different place from where my any sort of anger might come up. It isn't anger that's affected me personally. I feel the anger of the actual defiance of love and truth on a larger scale rather than something I have to collect for myself. And so it's interesting how I'm more successful in the spirit realms that way, because I do simply recognize them as a part, not part of me. And even in the waking world, I have been practicing speaking to them, just saying, you're not welcome, or do that again. It'll just be something to correct you. But it seems to be very quick and very, I don't take on their energy. Humans are a little more tricky to me, but that's interesting. But I think I could take a lot of this into that realm as my cells recalibrate. here, that may actually imagine the freedom I could have in the dream space. Freedom to even walk away, freedom to even um, watch a demon or an evil entity just completely transform in front of my mind's eye in the dream.
We want to remind you that the demons you see in the spirit world are your brothers and sisters also, just so degraded in their soul that they don't look human. And many people choose to go this route because they feel powerful. And because they're not powerful with you, that's why you're successful with them. But we're showing Rita a picture of someone on a runway with the lights, just directing without, you can't be heard. So they're just directing with lights. And it can be that simple for you, both in the spirit world and in the physical, to take someone's desire to be powerful over you or project at you their own choices. You can just move them along without even feeling anger towards them or their choices, because that is damaging to you.
Yes.
And then you will feel the power in just diverting the energy coming at you with light, with love and truth, with self-love.
I have a feeling that those in that realm don't want me to know this information. They don't want me to start practicing this.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So.
And yet, as they will experience, they will be set free in that moment. Whether they choose to stay free or not is up to them.
Right. Very interesting. It's almost like that. The only thing I can equate to that we have is that idea in the Star Wars movies where, the Jedi sort of like tells the Imperial soldiers, it's okay, I'm not who you're looking for. I'm happy to see you, you're happy to see me. And she just redirects them by seeing them with love and compassion and shining a light. It isn't. I feel it isn't trickery. It's just genuine.
Yes.
Show a light, and those folks just ease. Oh, I'm so glad that you're here.
Yes.
They actually feel their real feelings, and because you can equate that with someone who's like, you let their soul degrade to such a point, they actually have a desire to feel that release.
Yes.
And
they use their addiction to power as the release rather than the actual
yes.
release. So you might see demons collapse into tears.
Because it really is what that degraded soul has been needing.
Yes.
So I haven't really. You almost think of those scenes in those movies as trickery and mind tricks, but they aren't meant to be that.
Mm-hmm.
So my mom's here. So we may have to wrap up,
Okay.
but that's okay. So it's probably time to wrap up with that last one anyway.
Okay.
All right. Good. Well, we'll talk soon.
Alrighty. All
Thanks.
right. I
Oh,
hope that was good.
it was great. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye.